Tales of Crestoria is the next big mobile game for this incredible franchise, and I was beyond ecstatic to have been granted the opportunity to play an early test build. I've played quite a bit of Crestoria in the time I've been able to test this game out, and I'd like to inform you all on what I liked so far and what I don't. I'm gonna try to avoid what's obviously still in development since this was a test build I've been playing on, but that kinda goes without saying. You all are smart, just thought I'd throw that out there. Also, as you may or may not have noticed, this is my own footage and I played this on an iPhone XR, so apologies if the footage resolution doesn't quite fit the screen as per usual, and apologies for the bar at the bottom of the screen. It's completely out of my control and I did the best with what I could. Go easy on me. Anyway, without further ado, this is the Tales of Crestoria test build. The good and the bad. Starting with... So first things first, while Crestoria is a mobile game, it's not styled in the pick up and play fashion I'd expect for mobile gaming. Crestoria is a full-fledged experience, and that ambition alone is one of my favorite parts. The game's been delayed for quite some time now, but you can tell that time was spent to polish the hell out of this, and I'm so happy with the amount of effort put into the game. And you needn't look any further than the game's visuals, because boy oh boy does this game look great. Character models are detailed, with some of the guest characters looking very close to their console iterations. The game aims for 60 FPS, and most of the time it retained that very well. Results may vary depending on what your device is, but the game has a good amount of graphical settings to help those with less powerful hardware still be able to enjoy the game. The UI looks clean, illustrations both in terms of character portraits and specific moments in the story are gorgeous, and there are even anime cutscenes, hell yeah! They all look great, but that kinda goes without saying, just look at the footage I'm showing you. Then there are the new characters' excellent designs, keeping the series status quo of distinct looking casts. Oh yeah, this game has a whole new cast of characters. They're all pretty darn likable at that. Normally the Tales mobile games will introduce a handful of new characters, but this game brought in a whole new party and side characters aplenty. Again, ambition. That being said, the game's narrative has been pretty enjoyable so far from what I've played. It wastes no time becoming interesting, and that momentum doesn't slow down for a good while because this story is wild, and I love it for that. I'm of course nowhere near done with it, but from what I've experienced, consider me impressed. There's a heavy focus on the new characters, with some guest stars making appearances every now and then, and this game handles the clash of the old and new characters in the best way possible. Older Tales characters are here as co-stars or special guests, and I like that a lot because the game is very faithful to their personalities and how they'd act in this game's world, but they also don't detract from the main focus. Crestoria manages to be a fun crossover that can do its own thing without feeling disjointed, and that's incredibly commendable. Then there's this game's battle system, the turn-based combat. Very different from your typical Tales game, but I've always been a believer in simpler gameplay for mobile gaming. Being able to translate the series' tried and true combat to something reasonable to do with touch controls is an incredibly demanding task and one I don't think has been fulfilled quite yet. So I was on board with something like this. And it works. It's not perfect, more on that in a bit, but it's enjoyable if anything. How it works is that you can tap which character to use and touch one of said character's icons to either attack or support another character, like healing them. There's a bit of a combo system in place where the more hits you rack up on an enemy, the more you can increase your party's damage output. Certain characters can use Mystic Arts to raise that combo count and damage output even further, you can equip items to raise specific stats, and you of course have an elemental rock paper scissors system to add another layer of strategy in terms of which characters you use, the order in which you attack, etc. Combat isn't too complicated to the point where you have to think about every single move, but it's far from mindless so that I'm engaged enough. I like it a lot and had more fun playing the game than I expected. Also, the battle theme's low-key a bop. Honestly, I like almost all of the soundtrack. It's got such a cozy vibe with its guitar being the most prevalent instrument. Good stuff all around. Finally, I just love the fact that this is such an inclusive crossover event for my favorite gaming franchise. It's been so long since we've had something like this readily available outside of Japan, so it's nice to just be included in something like this because I love these guys. I want to spend more time with all the diverse personalities in a way outside of their games, and Crestoria is a great way to go about that. It feels like a big old celebration, and that's kind of fitting given the fact that this series turns 25 later on this year. The game makes me feel good, and a game's overall vibe is something I value a lot. Add in a ton of customization in terms of how you organize your menu, buff your characters with Memoria Stones, make your account, and even a whole guild system. There's a lot more to the game than I was expecting and plenty to chew on. That being said, nothing's perfect, so let's get into... First things first, when you start up the game, there's a lot of downloading going on. This is quite a big app going on your phone, so it's highly recommended that you play this on a good Wi-Fi connection, at least your first time. This means a bunch of waiting, but with some patience you'll be in. Cool. At least until the game starts giving out its tutorials, and these are done in the worst way possible, being extremely intrusive and handholdy. The game forces you to mess with almost all of its menus and features, and it takes forever. Why not just let me go through the game's features on my own and briefly explain them in a pop-up box? You have them, use them more. Instead, the game's all like, you can do this thing. Do it. Do it right now! The tutorials are so long too, and it felt like every time I unlocked something new, the game forced me to mess with them. I'd really like to explore these features at my own pace. Oh, and yeah, you gotta unlock most of the game's features. This sadly includes a lot of the game's more exciting aspects like the guilds, side missions, and the arena, and while it isn't inherently a bad thing to have the player unlock extra features, the rate at which you unlock them is so slow, and I worry that people will lose interest before getting to the point where these options become available to you. Most of them kinda came out of nowhere too when I finally got them, so it wouldn't hurt to make them available earlier. The battle system, again, is pretty good, but it has its issues as well. If you don't have a character that can heal, you aren't getting any HP back at all. You can't heal in battle unless you have a healer in your party, which made for a ton of frustrating battles, especially near the beginning of the game when I was just starting and literally had no way of healing. As I said, the soundtrack's pretty solid for the most part, but it's also really small. For what felt like a billion battles at the start of the game, instead of the standard battle theme, I kept hearing the same "crap's getting real" song, and it cheapened a lot of what should have been great scenarios. For a game that includes all these different titles, it seemed afraid to use their soundtracks, and I wish that wasn't the case. The game also loves giving you items, whether that be gold or items to help buff your characters and Memoria Stones, but a lot of it doesn't feel too substantial. I rarely use my gold at all, and while character or Memoria Stone buffing is nice, I don't know, I've got more of it than I know what to do with. I'd rather get more summoning crystals, or what this game calls them, gleam stones, because this game has a ton of gacha elements that, unfortunately, might just be my least favorite part of the game. Here's how it works. For 250 gleam stones, you can get one summon, and for 2,500, you get 10 with one SR character or higher guaranteed. And that right there is the root of my grievance with it, because for starters, that's not a deal. 250 times 10 is 2,500. The only difference between summoning individually or with a group is 100% getting a playable character, but that's another problem. Any character lower than an SR, just being an R, isn't a character you can actively play as during battle. They're simply Memoria Stones, and that sucks because this summoning rate is so skewed in favor of R-ranked characters when you can't even play as them. With gacha games, I believe there's a particular psychology needed in order to make it a successful one. So much of those games' enjoyability derives from the rate at which you're getting the main collectible characters, more specifically rare characters that do best in battle and have the most fanfare surrounding them. At the start, you're handed one free character, and if you want, that character can be an SSR. They have the highest damage output, highest stats at that, are the only characters who can do mystic arts, and are undeniably the best characters in the game, but you've only got a measly 5% chance at pulling them, and that rate isn't budging one bit. I decided to pick Velvet at the start because the art is amazing and I wanted to earn my favorites like my boy Yuri, but I've been kicking myself over that decision ever since because you just don't get characters fast enough. I'm encouraged to wait for a multi-summon because I'll at least get one character I can use in battle, but it takes forever to get there, so I might as well summon one character at a time. Oops, I got a Memoria Stone, there goes 250 Gleam Stones wasted. These shouldn't be in the same summoning pool as playable characters, or at least the rate of SR and R characters should be flipped. I think it's fair to give me a higher chance of getting characters I'm actually able to use in battle rather than items, come on now. I also think that the amount of Gleam Stones needed to summon should either be lowered or introduce more options. If it were up to me, 250 of them to summon one is fine, but I'd also add the option to summon 5 characters for 1,000 with one SR or higher character guaranteed, making for a good deal and a higher rate at which characters are unlocked. If you're patient enough to save up for a 10 character summon, I think half of those should be guaranteed to be SR or higher, and you'd only need 2,000 Gleam Stones instead of 2,500. That can be seen as too generous, but if a player is experiencing a drought and getting more characters, then they're gonna lose interest. The ability to play as all these beloved characters is the whole selling point to this app, is it not? And I can only imagine how many they'll add over time, so don't be shy in letting players collect as many as humanly possible. This summoning system seems to encourage spending real money on Gleam Stones, which was a fear I had about this game when we found out that it was going to be gacha based, because I'm 100% free to play when it comes to mobile games, and I like to represent that crowd. You're given a plethora of Gleam Stones if you choose to go the pay route, but I don't choose that route, and this is what I have to show for it. 2 SSR characters, one of which the game literally handed to me, a couple of playable characters, and a whole bunch of Memoria Stones. I hope this is adjusted at least somewhat, but until it does, may the odds be ever in your favor. Now, that last negative was a big one, that's for sure, and it begs the question of whether or not this game is worth your time. In my opinion, I'd still say yes, and let me tell you why. This game has a lot going for it, and it's designed so that you can play it in short bursts thanks to how it splits up its story into segments, and also rewards those who will put a lot of time into it with elements such as items for logging in every day, a time box that rewards you more and more over the course of a single day, and delivering a narrative that wastes no time getting interesting while having a lot of beef to it. I can't shake my disappointment with the game's gacha elements, and given that it's a huge part of its identity, I can only hope that they skew the odds more in the direction of the player to make the game feel more rewarding. I came here for the characters, much like almost everyone else is going to, so the fact that I wasn't getting that many was frustrating. But even still, I kept coming back because the more I played, the more fun the game got. I was getting an odd crew to work with, but I liked getting out of my comfort zone and still being able to recognize and appreciate the great characters I had. The combat was a lot of fun regardless of not having the best of the best characters. The game is gorgeous and polished to a T, which encouraged me to keep playing and see more of it all, and there's a lot to do, meaning there were plenty of times where I thought I was gonna play for a few minutes, only for that to turn into a few hours. I've already put a good chunk of time into this game, and I expect to put in a lot more when the final build is ready for release and all my friends can join in for the fun. Hope my Velvet serves you all well. And my Yuri, if I ever get him, please come home already. I should have picked you, I know, I'm sorry!